Hi guys, this is Dormouse03.
And this is Kat, who
And
forgot she
this
had
is
to
another
introduce
episode.
herself.
Yep. And here is our second episode of Those Gamer Girls. And in this one, we're going to talk about DLC. And I think a few different facets of DLC, but I think mostly we're going to discuss kind of why most of it seems to not be very good.
Yep.
Which is weird, right? You know, you think you get a game, and then they make that you really like, and then they make more content for it. You should be really happy, and sometimes you are.
That should be
But
exciting.
I find a lot of times I look at DLC coming out, and I'm like, ugh, this,
More of this that I have to buy.
more of this, and we kind of wanted to talk about why we feel that way often. And so I think it comes down to a few things. But one of the main things for me is the idea of the quality versus the cost. So the quality and amount of content that you're getting for what they want to charge for DLC these days seems to be less and less equivalent with the price most times.
Oh yeah,
To me
definitely.
anyway. I mean, back in the day when things cost, $5 or less for most anything that you would get, it seemed more justifiable because you're only paying a couple of dollars. You get a little bit more content for something, and even if it's not the greatest quality,
It didn't
you
cost
still
you
don't feel
1,600
like you've
Microsoft
been,
points.
yeah, you still don't feel like you've been ripped off, you know. But when you're looking at things that cost $10 and $15 for a map pack that has 3 maps in it, and then the maps aren't even good, and then you can't even find the maps when you search on the playlists,
Yep.
you
Then what's
start
the
to feel
point?
like you paid a bunch of money for really nothing
Yeah.
that you got out of it. And
You paid a
and
bunch
you
of
start
money
to get
for
a
a
little
map
bit
you might play
jaded.
once.
Right. And then when you play on it, you realize that it's just not as good as a lot of the ones that came with the game in the first place. And
Yeah.
I don't really understand why that is a lot of times, because you'd think they had time after the game was released to figure out sort of which maps people liked and think, okay, what is it about those maps that people really like? And be able to release new maps that are at least as good as, if not better than, the maps that they've already released with the main game. But that just really does not seem to ever be the case.
No. Well, just like with that first set of maps that came for Halo 4, especially for Big Team, my favorite map, I believe, is Ragnarok. And it's, usually when it comes up, everyone votes for it because it's really good. Well, it got to the point where I almost never saw that come up. Every single time, like, 2 or more of the options would be DLC maps, and it's like I almost want to delete that DLC that I've got just so I can play on that map that I like, because it's just not coming up. It's not even a matter of people not voting for it. I just don't see it that often, and
Right.
that's just
Which is sort of
sad.
the double-edged sword, right? Because at least the maps that you paid for are coming up in the playlists, but they're not very good,
No.
so you don't want to play on them. And it's kind of like, well, I paid this money for this stuff, so it's kind of nice to actually be able to play on it.
Yeah,
But
but
on the other hand, I paid for this stuff that I don't really enjoy as much as the other stuff, so I don't even want it.
yeah, I just don't even want it. I mean, some of them are okay, but most of them, I just don't want them. I would prefer the original maps that are there. Now, I can't
Yeah.
speak to the other map packs that have come out since then, but
Right. You're just talking about the first map pack that released for it, which I forget
right.
what it was called.
Yes, I forget as well.
Crimson, I
Right,
think.
yeah,
But
Crimson. With like Shatter
you
and
know,
Wreckage and stuff.
yes. And so I don't know. Halo, at least, I feel does it slightly better because they do often have playlists that are strictly for those map packs.
Yes.
And so, at least if you've paid for the content, you will definitely be able to play on it. Whereas a lot of games release stuff that has extra content in it, but then if you're playing it and people, the majority of the people that are playing, or even one of them that's playing with you, doesn't have it, you just never see it
Yeah.
at all. And it becomes to where it's almost impossible to get the thing that you paid for. Um, and the another problem that I have with Map Pack DLC in particular is that you often just you don't get a lot of content, right, for your money.
No.
When you think you paid $60, at release for a game that included campaign, it included multiplayer, it included at least probably 8 or 10 maps for that multiplayer, if not more. Um and then probably a few different modes as well. Like, Halo has the Spartan Ops missions, Call of Duty has the Spec Ops missions.
Right.
They have the zombies mode, they have, sometimes they have different modes in there. And when you get a map pack, it's like 3 or 4 maps that you can only play in certain modes.
That most of the time
Some of them
aren't that
that most of the
spectacular.
time aren't as good as what you got. And they want you to pay $10 or $15 for that, and that's, a fourth of the costs that you paid for the entire game just for a couple of shitty maps. It's ridiculous.
It is, yeah. And then they go and tie achievements to them, so it's like you can't even just say, "Oh, well, I don't want more maps," and then just
right.
leave it be.
And so I think that's a good point to make too, is that we both really care about completing our games. So seeing that 100% completion statistic, I think to both of us, it harks back to when you played games and they didn't have achievements or trophies or anything like that, we both still like to complete our games.
Yeah.
I liked seeing that 100% statistic in, say, GTA. And a lot of the things that you did were not easy to do. So it's not like they were easy to complete back then. They were sometimes very hard.
Yeah.
And so we're a little bit on the side of really, really wanting to complete things as much as we can, because I think that's, to me at least, it's a mark of I got the most that I can out of this game and truly mastered it. And when I look at my sort of achievements and the completion percentage that it shows that it's based on how many of those you have out of the total, then that tells me sort of how much have I mastered this game, how much value have I gotten out of what was given to me. And if I don't choose to play a mode or something that I paid for, it's not like you pay for something separately. When I pay for a single player game and it has multiplayer on it, I paid for the multiplayer too. So yes, I could choose not to play that if I didn't want to. I could choose not to buy the map packs if I didn't want to play them. But then when I look at the thing and it says, you've completed this game 66%, when I have completed the entirety of the sort of modes that I enjoyed, it just bothers me. It's like, no, I have mastered this game and I want to prove to myself that I have, and so I feel the need to get the rest of the things.
Well, and with so many
So,
games that put so much emphasis on their multiplayer, even if they're not really
yeah.
traditionally multiplayer games, it's hard to say, well, just ignore the multiplayer then, because you're right, you can go through the campaign and do everything that you can in that, and even in some of the other non, multiplayer competitive modes, and still have so many achievements left that you can't get unless you touch that. And for anybody who cares about actually trying to get as many of those as possible, to say, just, well, don't worry about it. I mean, how can you?
Right. I mean, eventually it's going to niggle at me because I'm going to look at, you know, my statistics and whatnot because I care about those kinds of things. And it's going to tell me that, a game that I really liked, I only have a less than stellar completion percentage for it, and that bothers me. And I'm like, no, no, that's not right. Um, and I need to go make it better. And maybe that's not how everyone feels. I know that's not how everyone feels about it, and
Right.
that's fine. Um, but to me, when you look at that list of achievements or trophies, it's kind of like a guideline by the developers that tells you, hey, these are the things that you need to play in, and these are the things that you need to do in order to conquer our game. And in order to get sort of the most out of our game. And when a lot of those are geared toward a multiplayer mode that may not be good, or a bunch of DLC that's, on these map packs that you have to pay an exorbitant amount for, um, it starts to really bother me, and it makes me not want to play those games, which is sad. Because I really enjoy the single player campaigns for Call of Duty, and I enjoy the Spec Ops missions for the Call of Duty games. But I don't like the multiplayer for Call of
Right.
Duty at all. Um, and so when they have achievements that are tied to these really expensive map packs for Call of Duty, and then they also might have achievements tied to the multiplayer on it, it makes me not want to buy those games. And, I did not buy Black Ops 2, where I may have been interested in playing the campaign of that game, because I knew that it was going to have a bunch of DLC, and I knew that it was going
An
to have
expensive DLC.
a bunch of multiplayer achievements for it. And I didn't care enough. I didn't like the game series enough to justify that to myself, to justify making myself feel like I need to put a bunch of time into something that I'm not gonna enjoy. And so that it's related, but it digresses a little bit from the topic of DLC. Um,
Well, I
I
think
mean,
the main problem with those kind of games too is just that you look at all of the DLC, and it's just all
right,
those map packs, and then it's you know almost equivalent to the original cost of the game.
right,
And when you don't care
yeah,
that much for the multiplayer, that's asking a lot of you to spend that much for it.
yeah.
And because we want all those
It's
achievements, if we do go and get that, then we're going to have to buy all of that DLC. And it's just
and you
craziness.
just start to think, no, that's not an investment that I want to saddle myself with.
I mean, for the cost of that
And I
DLC,
think
you
that,
could buy a whole other game.
yeah, exactly. And if you aren't interested in the content that is being given to you in the DLC, then, why buy a game when you know it's going to have another $50 or $60 worth of DLC that's going to be for the mode that you didn't originally want to play?
Yep.
So, it takes that idea of, well, now I'm going to have to play something that I don't really care that much about in order to feel like I've completed this game, and multiplied that exponentially by adding on all this DLC that's for it. And I think that a good example right now is Tomb Raider,
Yes.
where they have announced that all of the DLC that they are planning so far is for the multiplayer aspect of it. And the multiplayer aspect of it sucks.
Yes, it is just. It's not even a mediocre multiplayer, it's just not good at all.
It's just not good.
Especially because the
mean,
matchmaking system is so bad.
yeah. I think that that really hits it. For that multiplayer, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about what makes the multiplayer bad, because
Right.
that's a different discussion.
Yes, it is.
But I think the point is that the multiplayer is not very balanced, and it's not very fun to play for very long periods of time, and it makes me really sad that all the DLC that they're planning for a game that I really, really loved the single player campaign to is gonna be for this thing that I just don't care about.
And it just makes no sense.
Yeah, it really boggles my mind that they're like, we're gonna stand by our decision to put multiplayer into this game, and we're gonna work really hard to make it so that, you know, it's good. And it's like, well, that's fine if people really wanted you to make the multiplayer good, but I think the number one point is that nobody cared.
Yeah,
And so why
who
you're
was
giving us a bunch
rallying
of
with-
extra content?
Who
for
was
that.
rallying with torches and pitchforks going, we need multiplayer for Tomb Raider? It just, nobody. Nobody wanted
Nobody.
that.
And instead of giving us some really quality single player DLC, all we're gonna get for the foreseeable future, if not, you know, ever, is multiplayer, and it's just, it's sad to me.
I mean, at least they haven't put achievements on it yet, but
Right, knock on wood.
knock on wood, yeah.
Um,
but it's
but,
it's still a shame. It's still a shame
Right.
that
because I would snap up that single player DLC for that game in a heartbeat. But I'm never gonna buy those multiplayer packs.
no.
So, I mean, it's just, it seems stupid for them to put their resources into a losing proposition to me. So anyway, moving away from sort of the multiplayer DLC side of it, I think that a lot of single player DLC is also not great.
Right.
And I think that you hit the nail on the head with the reason why. When we were talking about this before, Kat.
Right. A lot of the time it
about-
just sort of feels like the content that they give you is like deleted scenes in movies. And you know, sometimes those
exactly.
deleted scenes are really good, but they just didn't quite have the time or they messed the pacing up a little bit. And when someone puts it back in a director's cut, you're like, yeah, I'm glad that's there, because I don't mind that it moves a little slower, because that was really quality material. But a lot of the time, you look at those deleted scenes, and they are deleted for a reason. So, you know, sometimes you get that DLC where it's that, oh, I see why it wasn't in there originally, but I really like what this adds to it. But sometimes you get this just really lackluster stuff that you're like, it feels like they just cut it from the original game for some reason, and then after the fact thought, hey, we have this content that, you know, we can make some money off of this. Slapped 1,200 Microsoft points price tag on it, and sell, and it just doesn't. It just falls flat, and you wonder, you know, why are they trying to milk that money out of you instead of trying to put something out that's actually really good?
Of quality. Yeah. I think that, you know, a lot of single player DLCs just, they really show that there wasn't much substance to them. And that's why they were cut from the game, or why the idea for them didn't quite make it into the game in the first place. And so, but they're like, but hey, now we can get some money off of this stuff that we don't have to put that much, you know, money and resources into. We can sell that to people. And, instead of trying to go out and really spend more time and more effort and more money and more resources into making something that is really good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on about the sort of deleted scenes comparison, because, some of them are really great, and there are some DLCs that I really enjoy, and really have enjoyed, and I think have added a lot to the game. But there are many, many, many more than that few that are really good, that just you fall completely flat, and you're like, man, why did I pay for this?
Yeah, you buy it and you just think, I wish I hadn't.
Yeah, I wish I hadn't. And that's sad, you know. Okay, the next sort of thing maybe that we could move into is the idea of holding back content for DLC. So sometimes you get something like, here's I think a good example of this, is like Lair of the Shadow Broker for Mass Effect 2. That you feel like that content is really integral to the story.
Yes.
You know, it's very much a part of the story going forward from 2 to 3, and it's really pretty important within the story of 2 as well. Although not as much so, but within the overall series, that's a really important thing to have played.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about the Shadow Broker all the
3
time, and
are not gonna make sense to you if you haven't played that DLC.
Exactly.
So, you know, it's pretty obvious that that was content that they had already either made or had the idea for, that they just did not put into Mass Effect 2 and decided to hold off for DLC. And, so what do you think about that?
well, in that case, I mean, I'm kind of torn because I'm really biased toward that piece of DLC. I think that's one of the best, if not the best, pieces of DLC I've ever purchased. And
Yes, I agree.
I also, with that, am in kind of a different situation than you were, because all of the DLC for that game was out, because I came back to it by the time 3 was out, so
You didn't play it and wait for
I didn't
half a
play it
year,
and wait for
and
that
then
content.
finally
Yeah.
it was there.
But
But
I do think it kind of
I
sucks
think-
when they do that, though, because
Yeah.
you feel like, as you're playing the game, you feel like there's kind of a hole there, and then you see that piece of DLC pop up, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and it comes off like they just wanted to get more money out of you for it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like before the time of DLC, they wouldn't be able to
They
hold that
wouldn't have done
off, so
that.
they would have put it in the game, and it feels like now it's just an excuse to keep the money rolling in after the game is done,
Yeah.
and I just don't think that's the right way to go about it.
Right. I mean, I think that that's true. I think that I can forgive them for that particular piece of DLC, though, because within the story of 2, it wasn't necessary. So you weren't missing anything really from the story aspect for that one particular game.
Right.
You know, to not have that in there.
It's not like
Unless
with
your
3
romance
and,
was Liara, in which case you were completely screwed. But,
and what was it, From Ashes or something? Was it the
yeah, well, I think that I was gonna get to that.
Okay. I'm jumping
Because I think that Lair of the Shadow Broker is forgivable to me, because while it does feel like it was missing, and when you play it, you see where, oh yeah, that was really missing, and you know that they held that back. The main game itself didn't really lose anything. The main major story arc for the game didn't lose anything.
Right.
without having that in there. And and it was so good
It was
to
so
begin
good,
with, and
yes.
and you had so much content in the original game that I didn't mind paying a little bit extra for some more of that fleshed it out a little bit
Right.
more, that gave me more time with the character that I really liked, and um, was a really good piece of DLC. I mean, like you said, I think that's my favorite DLC that I've ever bought. So I felt like the DLC itself was worth the cost that I paid for it, and probably more.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
um, and the game itself was really good as well. So I had no problem giving them more of my money because I was
Exactly.
overall satisfied with the experience. Um, However, when you move to Mass Effect 3 and you get the From Ashes DLC that was released day one, and we got for free because we bought the collector's editions.
Right. But
But
not for
for
free.
others,
I mean, it's included in the
well, yeah,
cost.
it was included in the increased cost for that. But I think the point is that, you know, we had to pay a little bit extra to have that content in there, and when you play it, it's like that is important
That
story
is
information.
that is completely
You know,
necessary.
it is a really, really major part of that story, and the the overall story of that installment would lose a lot without having that stuff in
Yes,
there, because
yes.
it's really integral
Well, instead of like a
to the
minor
plot line.
deleted scene of something you don't really need but adds a little bit to it, it's like you take one of the main scenes of the movie and then just cut it for no reason.
Yep.
And
Or you take a major character that gave a lot to the main plot line, not to a side plot,
Yeah.
you know, because I would consider your romance like a side plot to the main arc of the story, you know, that's not the main thing. And so having Liara not there did not really hurt the story of 2, but not having Javik and not having the information that he gave you about the Protheans and about, you know, fighting the Reapers and whatnot, that's the main storyline.
yes, that is
Of
information
3.
that you need.
And it makes it a lot richer to have that in there, and it just feels like cutting that stuff out cuts a lot. And so that's the point. And the fact that it came out day one is also, you know, just adds to that feeling of this was supposed to be part of the game. It's not something that's extra,
No.
you know. It was meant to be there from the beginning, and it wasn't just something that they were like, yeah, you know, we really want to develop this a little bit more, but we don't have time, and so we'll hold off on this and save it for later, and that way, if people really want to explore sort of this aspect of the universe and this character or whatever, they can go do this. They can buy this DLC and have more of that. But it's not really part of the main thing. No, it was really part of the main thing, and they
Yeah.
just decided to get more money out of it, which feels very, very cheap. It's a
Well,
cheap money grab.
and to a certain extent, I sort of feel like the Leviathan DLC was also that way.
Yeah.
To a
And
lesser
I haven't
extent
played
with
that yet, but
the extended edition that changed the ending that filled in those gaps, but when you think of the ending before all of that dialogue was in, and then you add the Leviathan to it, I don't think you would be as confused, because the Leviathan gives
does
more
fill
of
in
the
a lot of those
background
holes that
of the
made
Reapers
that made the
that
ending so nonsensical.
in the end you were like, what is this? This is brand new information. We should know more about this. And,
Right.
you know, with the Leviathan DLC in place, I mean, the fact that it's strange and still doesn't make sense in some ways is aside. At least between that
The fact
and
that it's
the added
really,
dialogue,
really poorly written.
it you at least
Aside.
kind of understand what's going on there, and it gives you a better understanding
Yeah.
of what's going on there. So that one also feels like something that they held
Sure.
back for some nonsensical reason. Because, you know, you get to the ending and you're like, that's information that they should have given you before that.
Yeah, it should have at least, because the ending was very jarring, because a lot of the concepts that they introduced in it made no sense in context to the rest of the game, because you'd never heard anything like that before.
Exactly.
All of that, like you said, was new information. And so it made it seem really out of place, and the ending feel very disjointed from the rest of the game. Aside from the fact that it was a pile of shit.
Well, yes, but let's not go there. That's a whole other conversation.
But, I mean, that's a different discussion. But besides that, I think the fact that it didn't make a lot of sense, I would agree, was filled in a lot by that DLC, and again, tells you that those were not new ideas that they had for the DLC, that they were kind of like, we don't really have time to really flesh this out, so maybe we'll just make that DLC. No, it was something that was planned from the get-go because it's really important.
Yep. It's not some side adventure that's fun or whatever. It's a crucial element of the story that is noticeably missing.
It's a crucial part of the
when you've got that there, you're like,
canon.
Oh, that thing that they were saying kind of makes sense now, and to me it's not forgivable that they're leaving that kind of content out. Now, something like the Omega one that I haven't played yet, so I don't know all of what it does for the story, but to me that one feels
more like
something that is, extra content that's not really necessary. Whereas those other two were so crucial to the story that they should have been there. They should have been in that original game.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, I think the overall thing that we're in agreement about is that holding back content for DLC can be good as long as it's not sort of a major plot point, and as long as it feels like the rest of the game didn't have holes.
Yeah.
When you were playing it the first time, you didn't feel like, ooh, this is really missing a lot of things.
As long as it's not something...
when the DLC comes out, it's like, oh, that fills those in. So I paid for a full game, but didn't get one.
Yeah, as long as it's not something that you need to actually understand the story.
Right, exactly. Alright, and so, winding down this discussion here, I mean, I think that DLC for me is... It's a hard thing, because I know that there are a lot of DLCs that I have enjoyed.
Yeah.
A lot of the Fallout ones come to mind. Pretty much all of those DLCs for Mass Effect 2 I really, really liked. Those are the major two that really
my silence means that I'm trying to think of some of the others.
Things. Now, I know that there has been other DLC. I like the ones for Saints Row the Third.
Oh yeah, the ones for Saints Row the Third were good.
And I think the general theme there is that those are all story DLCs, and those are all story DLCs that were not major to the storyline within the games that they came out for.
Yeah.
Now, the ones for Mass Effect 2 were important to bridge the gap between 2 and 3, but they weren't as important to the plot line of 2 itself.
You didn't need them to understand the plot line of 2.
Yeah, exactly.
It might enrich your understanding of it, and it might enrich the experience, but it's not a necessary part of it, and I think too often that kind of content is held back just to make some more money, and it's no good.
And I get the sort of business concepts behind DLC. It does. It makes a lot of sense that you've I mean, games don't make that big. There's not that wide of a profit margin on something that's not going to sell 100 bajillion copies like every new Call of Duty,
Right.
or something like that. You know, if it's not that big of a series, then it's not gonna make those people that much money. You know, in comparison to, other things. And so it makes sense for them to try to, take the work that they've done on a product and extend that. Um, because, they already have the coding, they have the assets, they have all of the stuff that they have made for the original game, and if they're able to reuse those and make some extra content for it, and then make a little bit of extra money off of that, that can really boost their profits.
Right.
I think that it's a shame, though, that they do that purely as a money grab, and when it's apparent that that's what it is, rather than, yes, we want to make some money off of this, but we also want to make sure that it's quality.
Right, rather than, oh, here's a game that I really liked. Oh, here, look at all this great content to enrich that experience for me, rather than, here are 4 map packs that are worth the price of your soul. Which is an exaggeration, but it's to make a point. It's that
the price of your soul is $60. That's a cheap soul right there.
now you're just making fun of me.
Anyway,
My point is that they are overpriced.
Yes, and that is
And not
a
as
point
good.
that I agree with. Yes, not as good.
I don't mind
Not as good at
spending
all.
money on content if it's good content and if
No.
it's content that I want, but too often
Mm-hmm.
you just see that content that you're like, why did they make this? Why is that there?
Right, exactly. So to wrap up, I think that, our major feelings on DLC is that there's a big potential there to really add something to our games, and to really add value, and to be able to give more of our money to developers for things that we like. And to support the games that we really want to support, and the things that we like about the games that they've made. But too often it feels like they're just doing something so that they can boost their profit margins slightly, and they don't really care that it's that good of a quality, and they so often overcharge for it, and there's not that sort of retail price degradation on DLC as there is on a major game. So,
Yeah.
a few months down the road, you could pay like $30 for a game, and then the DLC for it costs more than what you paid for the original game. And I think that that's ridiculous.
It is.
The worth of the DLC, the price of the DLC should decrease along with the price of the original game. Otherwise, it's really hard to me to justify when I bought a game for $10 or $20 because it's old, and I look and there's DLC that also costs $10 or $20 still.
Yeah.
And it's like,
And the ratio
That shouldn't
of
be.
content is just not right, because it's like whole game versus maybe 1 or 2 hours of gameplay or 3 or 4 maps.
right. And I mean, and I get
it's just
why
unbalanced.
they want to keep the price up, because, when you're paying $10 or $20 for a game, even if you're buying it new, and, and I often am, because I like to buy my things new. I like to support the developers when I can. But it really sucks when you're paying $20, and that is the retail price for that game now. And the DLC content for it costs half or as much or more than what you paid for the game.
And then it
I don't
never
know,
goes on
there's
sale.
just something, and then it never goes on sale.
Like, EA is
Just-
notorious for that. Just,
Yeah.
You know, it
Well,
goes on
EA is
sale
notorious for a lot of
and it's
things.
like 16% off or some nonsense thing where it's really not on sale.
Which comes out to 40 cents. You know, that you're gonna
Which they
save.
they usually put it on sale more than that, but my point is
Yeah,
that you know
they do,
you'll
but
see places where it's things that'll put it like 50, 60, even sometimes up to 70% off.
percent
And then you
off.
look at EA's sales and it's like, ooh, 30%.
Yeah, they're always like 30. And so, I don't know, or just never go on sale at all.
Or just don't go on
And
sale at all.
a lot of those older ones just never go on sale anymore.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I would like to get the DLC for Mirror's Edge because I really liked that game, and I'd like to get, you know, a little more out of it. Um, but the DLC for that I think costs like $10, and it just has. I've never seen it on sale. Um, and I didn't buy it right when it came out, and it's old. You know, it's an old game. That thing is several years old.
Right.
And it's like it's just never gonna go on sale, and I just don't understand that, because I really can't justify paying as much for a piece of DLC for a game that is that old that I did not pay that much for in the first place, when I could buy, you know, an entire arcade game for that money, or DLC for something that's new for that money. You know, it just
It just seems.
yeah. It just seems
like
ridiculous.
a waste. It just seems crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, those are our thoughts on DLC. Please leave us comments. Let us know what you think. If you have any favorite examples of DLC that you really, really liked or really didn't care for, or, you know, you have a thought on what they could do to make DLC better, leave comments. We would love to have discussions with you about
Yes,
that.
we would.
So that is our discussion on DLC, and that's what these gamer girls are thinking about this week. No one wants a knife spatula.